Hey, folks, welcome back to The Pulse. It is Friday again, October 27th, 11 a.m. Central Texas time. My name's Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and we do this every Friday. We've done this for a lot of Fridays. This is episode 27. And if you think 2 hours apiece, this is a lot of yakking with Steve Staggs. And boy, I'll tell you what, it has been insightful. This is really a view into conversations that we had for quite some time in private, right? Steve's been willing to, take his time to spend with a young whippersnapper like me to think about these things that I think are really they're really pivotal. And we were just having a discussion here in the green room before this as we got to think about what is God planning? What does he want us to talk about, right? And I've been wrestling with this idea that is, what does it look like to hold every thought captive? And we're all on this journey, and Steve's really good at being patient with me, and I aspire to be that someday as well. But folks, thanks for joining. This is Right Side Up with Steve Staggs. Let's welcome Steve in. What's up, Steve-O?
Hey, hello. How you doing there, dude?
I'm good. And introspective today, different kind of mood. Okay. Dealing with a lot of cares of the world.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes feeling overwhelmed, sometimes feeling, unsure, but then spending time, practicing this thing. Right. Yeah. So just as a context, I woke up again this morning, Steve. Same pudgy self, same pasty, skinny leg guy. And I looked at myself and I'm like, yep, we're here again. Here we go.
Another day.
And then I was like, well, I think I'm going to vibrate some air and I'm going to get it to your antenna and maybe we'll have a conversation here. But I take that as in the affirmative that that there's a plan.
Yeah.
There are things to do. So I got up at 4:30 this morning and I just sat in the quiet. I think there was an armadillo in the yard. That was about all that was going on. And I just had a conversation with the Lord. And what was really interesting today for me was I had a lot to kind of get out. It was kind of a counseling session, if you will. And I've told you many times in the past, there's been kind of these phrases of things like, "Hey, trust me, and I'll show you."
Yeah.
And this was much more of a really, really, much more kind of not shooting the breeze conversation. This wasn't like, "Let me tell you the secrets of the universe." It was more like, "Hey, how you doing?" Kind of like, I call my dad and he'd be like, always happy to hear from me. Kind of like, "Hey," and it wasn't like super pivotal or I'm going to drop on you the greatest, invention or, and actually there was something kind of nice about that, that it wasn't like, let me give you the secrets to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it made me think about if that's the nature of the conversation this morning. And what I took away from it and what I felt he was saying was, none of this is a surprise to me. I know of all of the things that you're dealing with. I know of every challenge you have. And it kind of made me think, if I were to wrap it all up and throw a softball pitch to you here on the eve of the World Series, I would say he impressed upon me the fact that even though I don't hold all of these things together at once, that I don't see how all of these things fit together, and I can't comprehend how a child in the Gaza Strip is considered by him, and he holds in his mind Steve Staggs and Crypto Heartbeat and Cadium and David Lee and all these people at once, and every intricate, he's he's in it all.
Yeah.
And because I don't understand that, I have a hard time fathoming that's just kind of the way it is. And that's one of the things I took away from it was that, um, okay, you're not alone, and your ways are not my ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of I was like, okay, so you got this. That was basically it. So you're saying you got this? And yeah, I got this. And I think when I said, I woke up again today, it was a reminder in some respects that I didn't have to. And in a way, the fact that we find ourselves here again, is just a reminder that there's purpose for us being here.
Yeah.
What do you? I know that's a lot of jumbled stuff, but what's your gut reaction to that?
Well, I don't hear it as jumbled at all. I hear it as very real.
Yeah.
I mean, we have talked about before and even touched on a little bit in the green room that one of the great tragedies, at least from my standpoint, insofar as we are concerned, humans, but is very clever from a spiritual strategic standpoint that opposes us, is to somehow train us to think that the things of God, the things of the kingdom, what Jesus is doing is a religious experience.
Yeah.
That it belongs in the world of that very both fluid and volatile place called religion. It's out there, and all of us get a chance to define what the religion is, which, by the way, is the very design of religion.
Yeah.
As we talked about in some of the previous episodes. But the reality is that unless you think God is a religious guy, then that's a distraction.
Yeah.
That's not the way that it is. I mean, he is very much engaged, as we've talked so many times here. He's very much engaged in every part of life, which includes the times when we're kind of in the trenches digging stuff out and we really don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Well, we know something's happening. We know things are moving around us. We know that we're in a time where decisions are really important. And it seems like the more important those decisions are, the louder the noise becomes.
Yep.
Well, guess what? That's just that's where life is engaged. And if I can use kind of the baseball analogy that we've kind of picked up on in some of our previous episodes, it's like learning to quiet the noise once you cross the white line. Yeah, you're in the dugout, you're yakking it up, you're concentrating on what's happening, you're razzing the guy because he whiffed on the previous at bat. You're looking at people in the stands, you're doing all of that kind of stuff. The crowd is going crazy. You might be totally pissed off because the guy made you look like a fool the last time at bat, or you may have made an. You see, in the dugout, you're dealing with all of the various noise elements that are a part of the game. Kind of like what you were doing this morning at 4:30 in the morning. But man, once you step on the field between those white lines, that's when your training kicks in, and all of a sudden, all of that noise evaporates, and there's a quiet. Now, here is the deal. When a guy is in a slump, it's because he's not in a place where he can quiet the noise. He is consciously thinking about what he's doing while he's in the game.
Yep.
No, there's a time to consciously think about what you're doing, but it's not when you're in the game. When you're in the game, the mind has to be quiet so the body can function in the way that it's been trained to function under high stress, high competitive environments. Well, that's what Jesus does with us. He teaches us how to do that. He trains us. He puts us in different environments. And if I were to use the baseball analogy, you were in the dugout today talking with the coach about what the heck's going on here. There's a lot of stuff happening here. And the coach doesn't say, hey, shut up, dude.
Right.
I got better things to think about. No, he pays attention because he knows that you are attending to your business. And so he attends to you.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's where the rubber meets the road. Otherwise it is just a religious experience where I get to define what is true and not true.
Yeah.
No, I don't get to define it. I get to observe it and then decide if I'm gonna cooperate with that or not.
That's good.
That's meat and potato stuff to me,
man. Yeah, that's good. Well, let's say hello to some folks and we'll dive into this. Michael Ostell's here. Boomer Sooner, y'all. That's a good response from you, Mike. Good to see you. It's great to have you here. And you're a big Sooners fan, isn't that right, Steve?
What's that?
You're a Sooners fan.
Yes, especially my wife. My wife is a diehard Boomer Sooner. We got our coffee cups for game day, and we do all that stuff. We tailgated for many, many years. Still season ticket holders, Mike.
Nice.
So
yeah. Awesome. David Lee's here from Southwestern Indiana. It's good to see you. Carter Hill is here. It's fall, y'all. Hello. Is it? I was at my son's football game. I had to guess which sport he was in.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, lost 40-0 again. A bunch of sixth graders and play a bunch of eighth graders, and boy, they're like men to our boys. It was still wasn't feeling like fall, but hopefully we are. Occasionally, I feel like in Texas, it's either 95 or it's like 45. So we never have really anything in between. Kadium's here. Hey, hello. Good to see you, Kadium. Thanks for being here. Taryn, great day all. All glory to Yahweh and his son and only begotten. Interesting. We had this discussion.
Yes,
Isn't that funny? We had that discussion. Maybe that's a sign for us.
I've got to kind of mess around to get out of the sun here. So forgive
you bet. And then Kinetics. What's up, Kinetics?
Yeah, dude.
You, man. Welcome back. And Taryn, I have created a playlist. And so I may not have the last 2 or 3 in there, but there's a playlist with at least the first 21 or 22 of them, but I'll continue to add them. Davis is here. What's up, Davis? Good to see you. It was good to see you yesterday as well. More and more people are coming out of the woodwork because we got ourselves potentially the beginning of a bull market. We'll see. Hopefully not a bull trap. David Lee is happy to see you. Great to see you here, man. Crypto Pez. I'm loving these videos. When virtual Texas, I want a passport. Nice. Although it's not bad here in southern Spain. Oh, you know what? My understanding of southern Spain is good stuff. Carter Hill, patience with me too, brother. Just like Jesus. Isn't that the truth? I have seen it in person, Carter. Steve's patience, and I admire it, and I long to learn the ways of the Staggs. My Online Ghost is here. Hexy Quinn is here. Love the quiet slow motion. There you go. What was that movie? Wasn't there a movie about that where he was pitching? Who was it? It wasn't Bull Durham. It was
same guy. It was For Love of the Game or something.
For the Love of the Game. For the Love of the Game. Yeah, that was a cool thing. And it was like everything went, whoa.
Yeah.
Sam Kemp is here. What's up, Sam? Good to see you. All right, so let's talk about that. It's interesting that Taryn brought that up about Yahweh. We may come back to this, Taryn, to talk about this. We literally talked about this in the so how about this? We'll talk about this in the second hour. First hour, let's kind of continue this conversation. You mentioned, earlier, we're in such a time of massive change.
Yeah.
And just as to tee up this concept to really talk about, I think first hour to really talk about what's happening in the world. It doesn't take a genius to figure out, in my lifetime that, I went from what, three channels on the television to now, this 24-hour news cycle to Twitter real time. I mean, I can literally get what's going on the ground in Israel, independent journalists, and then of course, talk about noise, from who's trusted, who's not. We've got, you know, exposure to the light of a lot of things that are causing us to, um, see things. And I think at a certain point, my childhood was one of kind of insulated from things, and then I think probably your childhood and even my grandfather's childhood. I mean, the only connection to anything international would have been prior to a film at the movies, right? Like go in and see some sort of war update on the war.
Yeah.
Um, so the change in technology, and of course, a lot of uncertain things because the change is so quick. I look at the concerns people have about AI, and they're saying the speed at which it's moving, people have no idea. Well, if there's anything, there's probably this general sense that, um, on one hand, everything's getting exposed. On the other hand, everything seems like it's becoming unglued. And then on the other hand, everything is changing so fast that it's going to be either painful to catch up or um, paralyzing to even try to comprehend. How should we look at change in the midst of all of this, right? We see suffering, we see change. It seems to be only accelerating.
Um, without intending to be glib at all, it is. Hey, are we happy with that? It's we've talked in the past about decisions being the seeds of reality's harvest. That is the little phrase that Jesus gave me 35, 40 years ago.
Say that again.
Decisions are the seeds of reality's harvest.
Yeah.
And so every time you make a decision, it's like planting a seed. Well, what is it that you've been talking about that's impressed you about the power of the seed?
Oh, it's an abundance.
Okay.
Right?
So it's not a one for one trade.
No.
When you plant a seed, man, the very nature and design of that is it's going to produce an abundance that dwarfs the initial investment.
Yep.
The ROI is spectacular. And so that's the way decisions are. And so we make a decision. That decision is then going to produce a harvest, and that harvest is going to be massively greater than anything that we anticipated when we made the decision. Well, it could be positive, it could be negative.
Yeah.
Some people who made early on the decision to get involved in HEX had no idea what the heck that was going to result in. That was a decision from an economic standpoint that produced an abundance that blew your brain off your shoulders.
Yep.
Okay? The same thing happens on the negative side. So when we look at the planet and everything that's going on, and when you ask me how should we think about it, I mean, I don't want to tell you how to think about it. I'll just describe to you how I think about it.
Okay.
And then invite others to consider the same. Am I happy with what I'm seeing? If I'm happy with what I'm seeing, then keep making the same kinds of decisions. If I'm not happy with what I'm seeing, consider making a different kind of decision. Now, okay, Steve, well, that's a philosophical answer. How do you make that thing real? Well, the first thing I do is I start looking at my own life. Am I a part of what I am observing through my eyes? Now, most of us are trained, okay, to think that what we see out there really we're not much a part of.
Yeah, that's true.
So we get to we get to sit in the bleachers and complain about it, and you know, judge it, criticize it, tell it how it needs to be done right, yada yada yada, while while we don't take the same view toward our own life and say, okay, what I'm observing out through my eyeballs is an accumulation of people making decisions, the produce of which is blowing the place up. I wonder if I'm doing the same thing in my own life. Am I isolated from that? Or am I actually a contributor to that and I don't even know I'm doing it? Well, guess what the question does? Am I happy with what I see out there? Well, what it does is it starts getting you to probe questions. Well, no, I'm not happy with what I see out there. Not whether it's right or wrong, not whether it's good or bad, not whether it's valuable or destructive. No, am I just simply happy? Do I look out there and I say, okay, the planet is making some really good decisions. Doggone it. Look at aren't we good? Look at the great things that we're doing out there. Man, are we smart? Or are we looking and saying, whoa, what the heck are we thinking? Not what are they thinking, what are we thinking? Because we're all an accumulative contributor to that outcome, every one of us in our own little way. So if we're not happy, then man, now we need to start making some different kinds of decisions, beginning with me. I need to start making some different decisions. Why? Because the accumulative effect of the way the world is taught to make decisions is blowing us up. So I need to step outside of that. I need to learn to make some different decisions. I need to learn how to view things in a different way. And then one decision after another begin to turn the tide. And so that's how I look at it.
Wow. Well, it's so profound, Steve. I ask you, I set you up, right? And of course, this is real common. People want to set you up because they think that you have a certain result. They think, oh, yeah, Steve's going to say this. And of course, it's so like Jesus, right? You think, hey, dude, why aren't you saying anything? And he's not saying anything. You're like, okay, he just said volumes by not saying anything at all.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
just saw that in you just now, right? Is that here we have all these crazy things that are going on. And instead of you saying, well, let me tell you how the problem in the Middle East is working out, or let me talk to you about US policy, what you're saying is, I think, so profound. So I want to reflect back to you because I recognize that as 100% true. But I think the implications of what you're saying are even greater than I even understand.
Yep.
And that is this. If I got problems at home, what I've learned over the years is that generally if I got problems at home and I find that I'm pointing the finger out, blaming somebody else or looking at situations in my home, I've come to recognize that I'm as the leader, right? I've created this situation. And I think about the practical nature of how this emanates, right? People I think have talked about the butterfly effect, right? Like one little change here has this dramatic change a long way away. But it's so true. I mentioned to you before, we've talked about the practical nature of, taking stuff home with you and being angry dad, right? And it's like, well, what is the effect, the long-term effect of bringing that stuff home?
Yeah.
And then, this practical nature of what does it mean kind of holding these thoughts captive, which is really more of like in partnership with Jesus. Like, what if I actually was kind of like operating with him? And you're right. You're talking to the coach in the dugout and then you're on the field and, you talk about, hey, it gets to the point where it's just like breathing. Well, yeah, you got to do a lot of crab walking before is just like breathing.
Yeah.
But you make a really good point. And Ray and I were talking about this before is, people joke about the mysteries of women, right? And I think guys can, if you've been in a relationship and you're married, this, right? But there's a really interesting connection here. If you've ever had the perfection of oneness with a wife, you know that isn't something that you trip and fall into.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is something that is cultivated, and it is intentionally structured that way. And of course, what do we see with uh um with the short circuits of that design? Whether it be pornography or whether it be um prostitution or whatever it may be, is that not understanding the nature of not just the physical sensation or anything like that, but the purpose of oneness, of completeness, of um it's a picture of something that is not um it's just not a function of labor. It's a view into the very structure and nature of, I think, the nature and character of God, the structure of how things are built. And when you say something like that, it's really interesting because you've mentioned before that, hey, this could all turn in a month, right? And what I sense, that the implications that I don't think I related to, was the fact that, well, if this starts with me and I look out there and I go, I'm not happy with what I've got. That could be my weight, that could be my health, that could be my marriage, that could be my business, that could be my financial situation, that could be my friendships, that could be just about anything. And if I was willing to kind of take the log out of my own eye, right, I was actually introspective and thoughtful in the sense of going, all right, maybe I need to make some different decisions here. And how fundamental that is, Steve, to like everything. And I don't think really many people I've ever talked to. I've had people and heard people say, well, if you got a problem at home, it's you, right? And you need to like work from that perspective. And I get that. But what you're saying is what we're looking out in this entire world is actually just a reflection of our own decision making. And it's collective, right? And it definitely aggregates. Um, keep going with that. Tell me more what you mean, because that's a really profound thought, is that, hey, it starts with you.
Well, yeah, it's very easy to require others to do what you yourself either aren't able to do or aren't can't do.
Yeah.
One of the other.
Or willing to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That it. I'll give you another baseball story, and then I'll come back to this. When I was playing with the A's, we developed a friendship with a gentleman named Jim Essian, his wife Janie. And when we first went to Oakland after breaking camp in Arizona, the apartment that we were renting wasn't going to be available for a couple of weeks, and so we Jim and Janie invited us into their home, and so we were staying with them. And my daughter's story at the time was only was less than a year old. She was only like 9 or 10 months old. And so we would, the nature of the baseball schedule is you're doing everything at night, right? Your day starts at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're driving to the ballpark. You normally get home by about midnight. You have dinner. And so, you're up till about 5 o'clock, and then you hit the hay, and, so very different than the normal 9 to 5 schedule. Well, my daughter, we'd sit there and talk or play cards and stuff like that. And my daughter would sit there and have conversations with us, just like she was one of us. Had no idea what she was saying, but you could tell that she knew exactly what she was saying. And so she would get in there and she would talk and engage with us. And we just thought that was the
Yes.
the greatest thing in the world. Um, so we developed a fabulous relationship. Janie really came to love Story and Marcia and all that. Well, years later, fast forward, Jimmy is now coaching the Oklahoma City 89ers baseball team, which was in a AAA team in the American Association. So I went to one of his games, to see him and stuff like that. So I'm sitting in the stands, and there was a guy right behind me, and the pitcher had thrown a couple of pretty tough pitches for the catcher to handle, and he missed a couple of them. And the guy behind me was just railing on the pitcher. On the catcher. What are you doing? You got to get in front of that. You got to catch that ball. Well, you don't belong here. You got to get rid of it. Just mercilessly railing on the guy. And so by about the second or third inning of him doing this, I looked behind him and I said, "Wow, you sound to me like you've got a pretty good handle on how the catcher's position. Did you play?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Were you a catcher?" He said, "Yeah, I did some catching." I said, Did you go pretty far?" He said, "Well, I played in high school." I said, "Were you good?" He said, "Yeah, I was pretty good. I'd say I was." I said, "I'll tell you what. I know the manager of this team, and here's what I can do if you'd like. Tomorrow, when the starting pitcher is getting ready for the game, I can arrange for you to catch him. And once he gets warmed up, I'll put you behind, I'll trade places with you, and I'll give you a glove, give you the whole works. And if you can put your glove on the first 5 pitches that are thrown to you, I'll give you $100. All you got to do, you don't have to catch them.
Just get your glove on them.
Just touch the ball with your glove, and I'll give you $100. You interested? He never said another word.
I'll bet he didn't.
Well, see, that's what we're trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
We're trained to sit in the cheap seats,
yep,
and criticize and judge and complain and tell everybody else how to do it when we ourselves aren't doing it. So the point of the whole matter is, on what basis do you demand of another what you're not willing to do for yourself? And that simple concept, it provides equilibrium in how we see things and how we view things. And I'm going to then take it the next step, which in my particular life then began to cause me to understand what this whole idea of Elohim was about. And what Jesus would do with me is, when there was a problem that I thought was insurmountable, that I thought, man, there's no way to get this taken care of. And speaking of, family, a lot of times my wife was the problem. If she would just see it this way.
That's right.
Right, doggone it. And by the way, she was doing the same thing with me.
Right? Oh, yeah.
What's wrong with you, man? You're an idiot. This is too flippin' simple. Why aren't you doing this?
Get with the program.
And then I'd be complaining to Jesus, "Oh, man, you need to make this go away." And he would say to me, "Steve, are you bigger than the problem, or is the problem bigger than you?" Now, I don't know what that does for you folks, but let me tell you what, that totally recalibrated me. Are you bigger than the problem, or is the problem bigger than you? Listen, folks, that is not a rhetorical question. That is a question that will totally recalibrate you if you start learning to ask that question and begin to answer it with Jesus. So what began to happen is I began to look at problems both from the perspective of what I was dealing with personally, and then start carrying them into the consulting work that I did to start learning how to deal with problems. Recognizing that, hey, these problems are here because they are inviting you not only to solve them, but in their solution, advance the cause.
Hmm.
Well, isn't that the way it actually works? If I got a problem at home, guess what? Either the problem is bigger than me or I'm bigger than the problem.
Yeah.
So, honey, are we bigger than the problem or is the problem bigger than us? Yeah, we have to move in 8 days and we've got this 3,000 square foot house that's full of stuff and it's screaming at us that it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
We are not going to be able to get the move done. This isn't going to happen. We are going to be left in the lurches. The problems are going to occur. And say, no, guess what? This house is going to do exactly what we tell it to do. Well, no, it's not. How is it going to happen? Okay, you're looking at the problems. I'm telling you what the solution is. The solution is this house and everything in it is going to do exactly what we tell it to do. And what we're telling it to do is it's going to be ready for the movers on this particular day. And we are locking the doors and walking out of the house. That is what's going to happen. Why? Because we are bigger than the problem. The problem is not bigger than us. Well, guess what happened? On the day, the movers came, we left, we walked. And you know, that might sound a little simplistic, but man, I'm not sure I have found a problem yet since realizing that was not true. The problem is going to scream at me that it's going to control the agenda. And Jesus says, is the problem bigger than you or are you bigger than the problem? Oh, well, if you're asking me that question, then maybe I need to rethink what I think about that problem and take a step back and start saying, okay, obviously, because you're asking me that is because I think the problem's bigger than me. I'm looking to escape this issue.
Yep.
And instead, what you're doing is you're saying, no, I need you to take a different look at this. Okay, I can look at it the way I want to, or I can accept the invitation and say, okay, how are you seeing this problem? Funny you should ask, Steve. Let me show you something. And I can give you 100 examples if I give you one of things that I thought were totally insurmountable, both in the physical realm, material realm, financial realm, spiritual realm, that would make your hair curl. And in every single instance, the Lord said, no, here's how we're going to deal with that.
You know what's amazing is you talked about the idea of being proactive. You're either reacting or you're being proactive. What's amazing about this, process, and I think it's really interesting because I've heard you say this so many times. You're like, hey, well, how do you see this? Right. And that's an interesting one. We talk about, Jesus is alive and he speaks, but you often will say, how do you see this? And of course, that's, in a way, a strategic use of this relationship. You're saying, okay, I'm going to do this with him. He's made it very clear to you that this is designed as a partnership.
Yeah.
And he wants to be our partner. And what I love about what you're saying is you go, look at it for what it is, right? We don't react. And I think one of the things I took away from one of our other visits was there are no more oh no's.
Yeah.
This idea that I'm not going to react to these things as if my hair's on fire anymore. But what you've said here is, as this Elohim man, right? As this man who is made in the image of God, you're saying, all right, and of course it goes right back. I mean, the scriptures talk about this so much. Is like, without me, you can do nothing. Yeah. But the implication is that with me, you can do just about anything. And this activation of who I've made you to be is made complete in our partnership.
Yeah.
And I think what's so cool about this is it's one thing to just try them on for size, right? That's kind of the simple thing. Like, hey, Jesus, you there? Like, what's up? But then there's this other thing that says, I think it's a very, very practical, repeatable question. How do you see this?
Yeah.
This is a problem that is really causing me some heartburn. And, I know that just reacting to this is only going to put you more into a mess and be more overwhelmed or more buried. And, you use this physical example of the house full of stuff. And of course, it's daunting,
Yeah.
right? In the natural, it's very daunting. But you're right. I had a buddy in business who said to me, the project fits the time allotted. And I love that because it was so true. Because if you allot a bunch of time, people waste their time. If
Yeah.
you have a narrow amount of time, you kind of, stuff does what you tell it to do. But that's so true. And I think that, it changes your very kind of relationship to, like, when you're willing to ask that question, hey, how do you see this? There's a lot packed in that question
Yeah.
because you're acknowledging that, hey, you obviously see this differently than I do. And wow, I mean, and here you are basically testifying the fact that you've practiced this for a long time and you haven't run into a problem that's insurmountable. That's pretty
No.
amazing.
Well, that is exactly right, Matt. And there's this verse that we quote all the time, and as kids we were kind of having a lot of fun. There is nothing impossible for God. You remember this we talked a few weeks ago about the what we call the rich young ruler who came to Jesus and said, "What must I do to be saved?" You know, um, and that whole thing. And then later on, Peter says, "Well, who can be saved?"
Yeah.
And that whole thing. And then Jesus, was responding to him that there is, what is impossible for men is possible with God. For all things are possible with him. Well,
Yeah.
what we do is we take that, and then as kids we say, "Well, can he make a rock he can't lift?"
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. Because we take the nothing impossible, and this is gonna. Here's another one of those examples where the translators misdirect us. The words "no thing," the word translated "thing" is the word rhema. So what Jesus is saying is nothing that God speaks is impossible for him. Not the fact that, hey, everything, is of the nut. No, that's not what he's saying. God is only obligated, if we can use that word, obligated to fulfill what he decrees.
Yeah.
Okay? So whatever he decrees, whatever he declares, whatever he commands, whatever he instructs, whatever he reveals, it's not impossible for him. It's very possible. In fact, it is by its very nature will be done exactly the way he describes it.
Yeah.
Because when he speaks it, he then produces all that is necessary to accomplish whatever it is that he's speaking. So when you say, "Okay, Jesus, what do you see in this?" There's this interesting dynamic that I can repeat what I hear, but I cannot describe what I do not see. And so I can repeat things that I have no comprehension of.
Yeah.
And I can probably sound pretty smart about stuff that I've heard and regurgitated that I have no idea what the heck that's about. But I cannot describe what I cannot see. So, Jesus, you see things in a particular way. If you describe them to me, just because I can regurgitate that doesn't mean I actually understand what it is that we're dealing with. So how are you seeing this? Because when you see it, see, the eyes create a context for the rest of the body to act. Ears don't do that. See, my hearing doesn't create the context for the body to act. The hearing is what attracts and informs our thinking and our feeling. But what we see creates the context for our body to react, to act in accordance with what we see in real terms. So guess what? If I have an issue that I have to deal with, my body has to be mobilized to do that. Hearing can give me some comprehension of what the issue is, but I've got to see it in order to know how the body needs to be mobilized to deal with the issue. So it's really important. And we're not often taught about that, but it's seeing and hearing. It's not either or.
Wow. Well, you know, it just connected for me
What's that?
was looking up at high places versus looking down with Jesus.
There you go.
And for those of you who don't know what I'm referencing, we had Steve come to the Gen Con conference, and he shared with us, and boy, you could hear a pin drop when you were talking to everybody. Was just like, I mean, everyone was affixed. But what you just said really, emphasized for me, I'm constantly looking up at these problems, right? And I'm looking up at these things that they're bigger, they're taller, they're higher than I am. And it's interesting. I just kind of imagine sitting next to you, right? Let's say, well, let's just make it real practical. You and I are sitting at a baseball game, right? I never played professional baseball, and I can imagine me leaning over to you and going, "Hey, Steve, what's going on there?" And you going, "All right, let me tell you what's really going on there." And it would be that way for us, right?
Yeah.
I don't have the experience that you've got. I'm saying, "Hey, what just happened there?" And you're like, "Let me tell you what's really happening there," because I know what's happening. And it's very, very practical to what you said about what does it mean to, hey, how do you see this? And I think what's really cool is the visual that I get is if I'm seated with him in with Jesus, and he's not in the high place, he is above it all,
Yes.
then I'm going to get the right perspective because I've seated myself in the right position versus looking up. I'm with him looking down and getting his view of it. And I think it's really interesting the language you're splitting here,
Yeah.
is this, how do you see it?
Yeah.
Is very specific. And it almost, by asking that question, forces you to sit next to him and go, "Hey, Steve, what are they doing there?" You're like, "Oh, let me tell you, this is," when he goes out to the mound, he's not just trying to make him feel bad. No, this is what's really going on.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't know that if I wasn't willing to sit next to you and go, "Hey, what's going on there? How do you see this, Steve?" It's really cool. It's really cool.
That is exactly right. I can tell you all day long how to hit a curveball, but if you can't see one, what good does it do? Because your mind, through hearing, is going to create an imaginary picture of what that looks like, and it's going to draw on what your experience is. So if you hear something, you're going to imagine something that then is built on the experience that you have. But when you see something, if it's brand new, it's very, very different. I mean, I could share a lot of examples about that, but it is so profoundly practical.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with here's one of the differences, Matt, and it speaks to this very issue. One of the things that happens inside the church is we are taught that it's okay to be academics. So what we do is spend an enormous amount of time studying the Bible, studying the history, studying the words, doing all of these things, all of which is incredibly valuable. We are taught there is almost no time spent in how you live this in an everyday manner.
Oh yeah.
And guess what? What ends up happening, what we hear and read, if we don't have the experience that comes from actually seeing the dynamic of what's in play, we create imaginary ideas about what those words and concepts mean. and they're imaginary. And we declare them to be true.
Wow.
And they're not true because we have no experience in dealing with them.
Well,
Name one other place in life where we say it's good enough to just study a topic and tell your goo-goo without experiencing it.
yeah. Yeah.
No, no. Experience informs what you see and hear.
Taste and see
Not
that the Lord is good.
There you go. And by the way, you just experienced that when you referred back to
Yeah.
the high
Well,
places.
I got another one for you.
Go, man.
You said, okay, so now here we are, the Mount of Transfiguration. Why did Jesus think that Peter and James and John needed to see that experience? And I think what's really interesting about it is here they go up, they see Moses and Elijah, and they see Jesus conferring with him, and they think they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And what's amazing about it is they're like, well, do we need to build you like some tents and some, I'll build you these things. And how amazing is this? Is that in that experience to say, you need to see this. And it wasn't all 12, right? It was the 3 dudes. And it's like, you need to see this. And of course, we know Thomas, like, I need to feel it. I need to actually get in there. But that he was willing to say, okay, there's going to be this time. But even in the midst of you seeing it, there's a voice that's going to come and say, I'm going to give you actually my perspective.
Yeah.
And what's so incredible about the transfiguration that we've talked about, and I think it's so important to mention when we're talking about that story, is the disciples, Peter, James, and John, saw this as equal things. They're like, well, we got Jesus and we've got Moses and Elijah. We got the law and the prophets. Everybody's here. It's a party. And the voice comes and says, this is my son. And it's interesting how even today we want to equate these things as equal. Yeah. And of course, that was this voice from above that says, this is my son, listen to him, which to me says these things are not equal.
Right.
That this is not, you've taken the law and the prophets, and there's so much packed in there. But what were they talking about? And the implications of the fact that they are still talking with Jesus.
Yes.
Because they're alive. Because Jesus is not the Lord of the dead. He's the Lord of the living. And how interesting that that's actually this perspective. Like, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to correct you in the process of showing you to have the right perspective of who I am. And that's just so powerful. And but it's so obvious too. It's like real common sense too, that you're like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like teaching my daughter who's going through, driver's education. It's like, well, let's just study a book. Let's never drive a car. Well, you're in for a world of it if you start driving without some practice.
It's a different experience, right?
Yeah.
One is knowing about, and the other is knowing by personal experience.
Yeah.
And by the way, those words are used commonly in the New Testament. And they are used differently, even though we use the same English word, either to know or to understand. They're very different words, oida and ginosko. One is a knowing by observation, another is knowing by firsthand personal experience. And when you listen to what Jesus is sharing and then observe how he deals with you when he shows you stuff, he's always bringing you into the experience of what you have just learned.
Yeah.
In our experience, and with Carter and others that that we've talked with, we have the 24 to 48 hour rule.
Yeah.
And sometimes it happens within 24 seconds or 24 minutes. But the point is that when Jesus is ready to show you something, he'll tell you about it. And then within a very, very short period of time, you'll find yourself right smack in the middle of the very experience that you just were told, that he told you about.
Yeah.
And it happens, well, if Carter were on here, Carter would be telling you it's probably happened several hundred times.
Yeah.
You yourself, talk about how many times it's happened to you. The point is, it's not a by accident, coincidental thing. It happens so frequently that you eventually start saying, okay, wow, the Lord just showed us something here. And you start anticipating the experience because you know it's coming.
Yeah. Well, and the it also is reflective in a very practical sense about how we see the most effective way in education, for
Yeah.
example. And you think about, there's the philosophical, right? There's kind of the liberal arts, if you will, but you don't want your surgeon working on you without some practice, right? And I think about these things that we would say, there's a lot of new, well, I know there's a lot of study around, okay, experiential learning and multidisciplinary stuff, because a lot of times when things are isolated, you're like, my son's like, why do I need to know this math, Dad? And I'm like, yeah, well, just trust me, it's going to be helpful. And then, but then when he's really excited because they're going to build a weather balloon that takes a camera up and goes really, really, really high up, and they have to determine trajectories and all this, and he's like, yeah, it's so cool, but yeah, he did all this math in the process of working on this project to do this, to see the practical application of it. And in a way, it's kind of this framework of how things work, right? How do we learn? But you're making a really good point. I think it's the disappointment that I've had as someone who came to the church as an adult. I was introduced as a kid, and to me, it was just a thing to do. And it wasn't until I didn't get really steeped in the whole uh, Christianity lingo stuff until I was 28.
Hmm.
And of course, I had to kind of, assimilate just to fit in. But I've always been frustrated by the fact that there's a lot of emphasis on acquisition, right? There's a lot of acquisition, but there's not a lot of this cultivation of the practice. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of, I think that there's Bible studies and reflection and some of the what people would call the spiritual disciplines. But I would say for the majority of people, it's entertainment, and it's not, and because it lacks practical application, it seems tired at best.
Well, Matt, let's go back to where we started with, looking at the planet and are we happy? Um, how in the world are we going to contribute to the solution to what we see are massive problems in the world if we're not willing to practice how to solve the problems in our own life?
Yeah.
It's very fundamental and basic. If we can use the overused word, it's so flippin' practical, it blows your brains out how practical it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so, okay, so what if we have all the solutions with what's going on with Israel and Hamas and Iran and all of that stuff? So is that something that's going to change, or have we just created a bridge to the next powder cake?
Yeah.
What are we doing? I don't know about you, but when I solve a problem, I don't want to have to mess with it again.
Yeah.
I just want to solve the thing, and whatever it is that gave entry for that problem to occur, I want to learn how to be bigger than that problem so I don't invite it back into my house.
Yeah.
No, you had your turn. Thank you for your instruction. Now exit the premises and do it now. And then, oh, by the way, it does it. Why is it doing that? Oh, because you're part of the Elohim class. What does the Elohim class do? It's the ruling class. Everybody knows it in creation but you.
Yeah. You've forgotten who you are.
Learn it.
So let me.
Be glad you did.
I'm going to throw a knuckleball at you this time.
Okay.
You ready? No, this is yeah. Get ready. It's gonna have some Magnus effect on it. So I got a buddy, a close friend, who lives in the town in Maine where 18 people got killed yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
He's the manhunt. He's still on the loose. Mentally ill guy shot up a bowling alley and a bar and grill, injured, I don't know, maybe 80. And I mean, it's crazy. Like, you know, but killed, I think 18 or 22. And I talked to him. He's like, yeah, we're like on alert. They've shown where he's been. He drove by my house, like directly out front. So he's that close to it. And he knows some of these people that were killed. And one of the guys that was killed is he's like this really sweet man who does sign language services.
Hmm.
He's somebody that, I guess he's really well known, and he does the sign language stuff for, I guess, important people, and is a well-known person, but I guess a really wonderful person. Okay. And of course, this is tragic. But so also is children being decapitated by Hamas.
Yeah.
And I think about, this, there's some kind of standard things. We're like, hey, what kind of problems you got? Well, that's an interesting problem. Besides the fact that you're fearful in your home, but also that your loved one, indiscriminately has been shot and killed. That's a problem, Steve.
Yeah.
Now, I tend to look at this and try to back out, right? I think that I'm doing the right thing when I back out. I even look into the scriptures, and I think about some of these scenarios like Korah's rebellion, where 250 of the leaders of Israel basically said to Moses and Aaron, "You guys are lording this thing over me." And they're like, "Well, why don't you show up tomorrow morning with your sensors full, and we'll see what the Lord says." And he liquefied them. The fire came out of the altar, and literally they were turned to dust. They hammered out their sensors on these were the leaders of Israel, right? Then there was like a plague. The earth swallowed people.
Mm-hmm.
Bridge that for me. Bridge that problem for me. Because on one hand, I look at it and I say, you know what? The fact that I am sad and that I'm, bummed that anyone that I love would have passed, so suddenly, I have to remind myself that what I think is life is not life. That's the only way I can kind of be okay with it, is that, all right, I'm holding on to something here that clearly is eternal, that I don't see as eternal. I see as temporary, but I'm still upset about it. How does that problem fit into this construct, right? I can understand, well, if I'm a nicer person, or if if I make some better decisions in my life, if I, and some of those are really consequential and some of those aren't as consequential. Like maybe I should be nicer to my wife and actually listen to her. Maybe I should stop being so damn selfish and maybe sit with her for a bit and maybe understand what the heck's going on with her.
Yeah.
That's not like jump in front of a bullet. Bridge those for me. Help me understand how to relate to those type of problems, because they seem like they're in a different category.
Yeah,
It's my best knuckleball.
Yeah, it's a good one. We have been trained with this idea that devices are what changed the world. So if we have the right kind of law, which is a device, if we have the right kind of technology, that's a device. If we have the right kind of tools, education, things like that, those are devices. If we have the right kinds of things, devices, then we can change the world. We can rid ourselves of all of this stuff. But as we've talked about before, devices are neutral. They have no animating capability of their own. Even AI has to be animated by one who has a life force in it, which are human beings. You remove the human, and the device will be rendered inoperable. What changes the world is not a device, a thing, a law. the absence of something or the addition of something. What changes the world is nature and character. You change the nature and character of the animating force, and you change the use of the device, which changes the outcome that the device produces in concert with the animating force. So nature and character is what changes the world. Now, let's go back to what we were talking about before. You made a statement earlier on about the purity of the intimacy of a relationship does not just happen, it's cultivated. Well, what is it that you are cultivating? That happens to be an agricultural term.
Yeah.
You are planting seeds. Those seeds are what? They are decisions. Those decisions are then what? Nurtured. And what are they nurtured in? So the decision is made. It is the produce of a nature and character. And all the devices around it are designed to help facilitate that cultivation of that seed to bear its fruit, but it will bear after its own kind. So if what is cultivated is a domination from a nature and character that's designed to dominate, guess what you're going to cultivate and then produce? Domination. Is that domination then going to add to this unique, perfect union that you were talking about? No. What is it going to do? Exactly the opposite. So what is it that produces that unique, perfect union? It is a nature and character that considers the other party is more valuable than themselves. And if both parties will do that, then guess what? One is more valuable to the other, and the other is more valuable to that person. And guess what you have? The elevation of value of both parties toward one another. And you have a perfect union. That's nature and character. So what happened with with Moses and Korah? That was a nature and character issue. It wasn't about the decision making. It wasn't about the leadership. It was about the nature and character in the leadership.
Yeah.
See? What's happening with this young man? Okay, there is a nature and character that's in operation, and it is to kill. If you've ever been around a spirit of murder, man, that dude is nasty. The Lord took us to Arlington, Texas many years ago, and we found this townhouse in a brand new addition that was built. We actually ended up meeting some really great people who became some really great friends of ours who happened to move in about the same time across the street. Beautiful addition, absolutely gorgeous. We were driving into the addition one day, and it was like something just punched us. It was like this descending, I don't even know how to describe it other than a sensation, a feeling that was so vile, thick, and heavy. It was like, whoa, what the heck did we just drive into? And I grew up in Southern California with really heavy fog, and it was like that on steroids. And we drove in, got into the house. There was just this, human language, English language is not even able to describe what I felt and experienced. Try to get out of the sun here a minute. And so we came in the house, my little kid, my kids were like 6 and 8 years old. My beautiful little wife, we were just, what is going on? Come to find out the next day that somebody had killed 3 teenagers 2 doors down from us and stuffed them, one behind, one in a washing machine. Now think about this. To stuff a teenager into a dryer, one into a washing machine, and one behind the washer and dryer. And it was palpable. Well, guess what? There was a nature, there was a spirit, there was a nature and character at work that thirsted for blood. Not just any blood, but the blood of the innocent. Well, guess what? That's not about devices. That's
Right.
about nature and character. So if you want to change the world, change the nature and character, beginning with my nature and character. Okay? That to me is what is the bridge to it all.
It is. It is. And that's so strong, Steve. And it's so helpful. I think a lot of people, you think those that are apologists, right, hear that classic religious question all the time. Why does God let bad things happen to good people? And you just actually, I think, answered it for the first time that I've ever heard it answered. That's satisfactory to me. It's like, and you think at the root cause of this, how, and I'm just reflecting to you how powerful this idea is what is my nature and character, right? And what's so neat about this is now when I think about the scriptures and I think about the stories of the prodigal son, I'm just so blown away because it's the picture of everything in one story. It's
Yeah.
like this is life right here,
Yep.
that we would go our own way and want to have our thing, and that the one who loves us says, "Okay, you can have it because you have free will to make choices on your own, son." And you go off and you go your own way, and what does it end up doing, right? Its nature and character is yours. And what is your nature and character? Get mine at all cost. Go out there and live this raucous life. And what ends up happening is it produces the fruit that it produces.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, right? It's like, what's the nature and character of this guy, right? And it's interesting also, you've said before too, that when Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan," he didn't say, "Get behind me, Peter."
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is to think of this man. And of course, my mother had schizophrenia and she heard voices like
Mm.
constantly. And of course, one of the things they're saying about this guy that I don't think they've caught yet is that he was dealing with those issues, right? Hearing voices.
Yeah.
And of course, whatever you think about this, what are the spirits that affect the nature and character, right? And I'm sure there's all kinds of, secular psychologists will say, well, it was this and that and the other. But when you think about what you just said, right, the spirit that is thirsting for blood or whatever that it may be, is us recognizing that that's what the battle is for. The battle is for the nature and character, the hearts and minds of those who, and it's interesting because there's so many promises to, even in crypto, right? It's like, don't consider anyone else, just get yours. But we see the things that actually work are the ones in which people consider others in addition to themselves. This is the whole point of why the Richard Art ecosystem actually, I think, is attractive to me, is because there is one in leadership who is basically saying, this isn't just about me winning. I've already won. It's
Yeah.
now time that we advocate for you.
Yeah.
And I recognize that, right? I see that. And it's not just somebody who's like, oh, I'm just a nerd and I really care just about, tech. It's all about the tech. No, there's actually a genuine advocacy for you. So thank you, Steve. I mean, this is an answer to me in a way to say these things that are traumatic, whether they're just emotional relationships at home traumatic, or literally people are being mowed down
Yeah.
in your town. And to think that that's kind of like the battle. You said earlier in the green room, you're like, the battle is not between flesh and blood.
Yeah.
And then when you say it like this, it makes me think, okay, you're right. This is actually a battle for the very hearts and minds of the people. And to think that this whole thing has been about, like the prodigal son going, oh, maybe my father will let me back in and be like his slaves. And he comes out and goes, no, 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 no. You need to know the nature and character of your father. Here's the ring and the robe. And I think about that and I go, okay, there's hope there. There is real hope there that we can come back.
Well, think about this for a minute, Matt. I mean, you know, I've come to that place in life where I qualify as a card carrying gray hair. And so, I heard a guy say probably 35, 40 years ago, he said, one of the great things about being old is that it gives you perspective.
Yeah.
And so you do get a chance to gain some perspective. So let me give you a little bit. When I was in high school, I don't know if we shared this in any of our streams. I can't imagine we haven't, but in case I didn't, when I was in high school, the three most severe crimes, behavioral problems of teenagers was smoking in the bathroom, chewing gum, and ditching class.
Yeah.
Those were the three most severe behavioral problems that drove the administration crazy. These daggone kids keep smoking in the bathroom. They keep chewing.
And it was cigarettes.
Yes, cigarettes. And for those, cools were just coming out, so cools were the big thing, right? They keep chewing gum in class, and doggone it, they keep during lunch, they leave and they won't come back for the next hour. Well, what are the three most egregious behavioral problems today? Kids bringing guns to blow their classmates up. I mean, why do you need to go any further than that?
Yeah.
Teachers having virtually no ability to control what is happening in the classroom. Our kids in so many of the schools can't even read to the level of their grade, let alone perform math skills to the level of their grade. Now, wait a minute. Now, I know I'm old, but in the context of time, I am just a pup, right? So what's happened over those 60 years that have caused that much of a decline in what's happening to our children, to the point where we look at the younger generation and we say, who the heck are these people? Talk about aliens. I mean, whoa, who taught them to think like this?
Yeah.
Well, guess what that is? See, how do we approach it? We approach it from a thing standpoint. Oh, we need to have more counseling. We need to have more education. We need to have more this, more that, more the other thing. It's a thing on top of a thing.
Yep.
And what are the things producing? They are producing a decline in moral character that is mind-numbing to anyone who knows the difference between a before and after.
Yeah.
Well, that's a nature and character thing. That's about nature and character. That's not about the things. It's not about the devices. It's about the nature and character that's utilizing the devices. Well, who's now taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, what's happening to those parents who are actually doing that? There's a nature and character that's rising up and saying, no, we're going to actually start considering you the source of danger. Well, back to your comment that we were talking about in the green room, if our conflict is not against flesh and blood, where is that nature and character coming from?
Yeah.
And how do we like it? Do we like what we see? Or is it at some point we're going to move into our aha and say, hey, Jesus, I'm thinking that I don't like what I'm seeing very much. How are you seeing it? Am I seeing it the way you're seeing it? Will you show me how you're seeing it? And then Lord, can we start changing this from the inside out, from me out? Hey, Lord, let's do that. I've got my own little world inside my family. Let's start there. Oh, I've got a world that extends out there to where I work. Let's start there. I've got neighbors. See, there is a rippling effect that goes out. And by the way, once you start that, guess what you have? You have the parable of the leaven and the 3 loaves. Yeah. The kingdom of God is like leaven that a woman put in 3 lumps of dough. And eventually the leaven took over the entire loaf. It's there, it's ready, but we're the Elohim who have been given authority to rule the earth. How do we like our rule so far? Because we're doing it. How do we like it?
Wow. This is and this is really helpful and practical stuff. And you think about, well, what can I affect? Right? So let me ask you this. I've recognized that not everyone is a thumb or a finger. Not everyone is an ear or an eye or a elbow or a kneecap, but that we are in the context of life, wired and gifted in fashioned a certain way. And of course, we've talked about how that Jesus actually custom makes it for you, right? He like meets you right where you are, which is so cool.
Yeah.
But also, we talk about him decreeing things to us, right? And so I've asked people before. I asked you, and you asked me. You were like, "Hey, what is the calling? What is the decree? Right? What is the decree over your life?" You said, "I'm called to men of the transfer," and I said, "I'm gonna unlock global generosity." I was called to do that, And you think about those that are in the cheap seats, critical, and those who are, in the game. And do you think we're all called to be in the game?
We're all invited to be in the game, and we all have an assignment to perform in the game.
So are there those who, let's say, choose not to be in the game and not to take the assignment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change
otherwise we really don't have choice.
True. So you can choose not to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think the practicality, it's actually so cool how this all kind of, because I end up with these ahas and I'm like, well, maybe somebody else has got an aha from all of this stuff. It's interesting. I was telling you the other day that I was listening to a young Benjamin Netanyahu in front of Congress prior to him, or he was just prime minister the first time. And he was talking about how basically we solved these problems, and one of them was Iran. And this was way back in the day. This is the 80s or 90s. And he's in front of Congress and he says, and it's like, you can go find this, him saying this. He said, all you have to do to Iran is pump in Melrose Place and 90210. And of course, if you know those shows from the 90s, 90210, and it was a picture, and you think about it, you're affecting the nature and character of a group of people, right? If you can get these people to have a taste of this Western, and I would say potentially decadence or freedom or whatever, you could criticize it from a lot of different promiscuity. You could talk about it, materialism, but this Western, fun value thing, you will basically, you'll ultimately get what you want. And of course, what do we find right now in Iran? Most people don't know this, but the Iranian people are highly secular people and have been westernized.
Yes.
And people don't know this. I had a buddy who literally was from Iran. He had come, he's a citizen now of the United States. He's like, yeah, like the clerics, the mullahs and all this stuff and Sharia law and all that, that's a heavy hand. People are longing, they're on the internet, they're longing for Melrose Place and 90210. And it's interesting. We think that is good, right? We think of that as good in kind of a Western versus Middle Eastern kind of thing. But what it really is reflective of is how we control people by essentially affecting their nature and character. And I remember when I was a kid, people would talk about virtue, and I think of what came out of the Depression era. Like, when was the last time somebody talked about the virtue of thrift?
Yeah.
Like,
Doesn't
I haven't heard that in 25 years,
no.
but it was a fundamental part of my grandfather's life.
Yes.
There were like these values, there were these character traits, and of course that comes out of an era. And you've written the 1960s white paper, and I think really interesting. Maybe we toss a little bit in here for the last 30 minutes about this, because I'm going to blame you hippies for the problem that we're in here, you old hippie. But no, seriously, you've written about this, and I think that we haven't really ever talked about this in our 27 episodes. That the spirit, and this is like we're going from 101 to at least 301 here. But I'm really curious, would you kind of share a bit of a teaser of what you've written in that white paper? And maybe some people might want to read that, could get that from you. We haven't done that in a while, where people could reach out to you and read that. But you outline really a shift of what has happened in the 1960s that we're kind of reaping from. And this is spiritual in nature, but also the spirits that have been essentially a part of potentially eroding nature and character, or at least, inserting. Yeah. So you know what you did. Tell us about it.
All right. I think Taryn asked for a copy of that. I think Mike, Stell, and Katium, and a few others. So if they've had a chance to read them, they'll recognize some of this. But Jesus asked me to write the 1960s white paper to give people a view and a perspective about where the genesis was for where we find ourselves today. It actually begins with or early on in the introduction, begins with this concept of decisions. If we like where we are, keep making the decisions we've been making. If we don't like where we are, then the way to change that is to change the way we make our decisions and the nature of the decisions that we make. And then it began in that context, decisions are the seeds of reality's harvest, with a question that Jesus asked me many, many years ago, which was, when did President Kennedy die? Now, this to me was one of those exchanges like what you were talking about today that was more conversational and consulting and coaching. It was one of those kind of hits you in the face that just shakes you into a different dimension than what you had ever concerned. So he said, and I was just tooling down the road one day, and he said, "Hey, Steve, when did President Kennedy die?" Well, I can remember it was like yesterday. I was in the 7th grade in my English class, Mrs. Hill's English class. Well, I came over the loudspeaker and I said, "Wow, November of 1963." Yeah. And so I said, "Oh, he died in Dallas, Texas, in November 1963." He said, "No, he didn't." I said, "What?" He said, "He died the moment he decided to drive in Dallas without a protective barrier. That's when he died." Man, I never thought that was a concept that was a billion miles. I mean, I can't even say it was a billion miles away because it did not exist in my mind.
Right.
What do you mean? And what he then began to show me as he opened it up, okay, show me what you see. Let me see what you see. And he was describing that a decision then produces another decision, which produces another decision. And these series of decisions are linked together until they produce the final decision. And the final decision then represents the harvest of that initial decision. And the decision to not drive in Dallas with a protective bubble over his car was going to produce the fruit, the outcome of the termination of his life. And nothing was going to alter that outcome unless and until he made a superior or countermanding decision that would change that course. And so what he was doing, he was describing to me not only the power of decision making, but then that there's an inalterable outcome that occurs from that decision, which is then an expression of sovereignty. All right, so there's a lot of elements in that. And so in that discussion, now he took me then back into the Adam and Eve story. Okay, in the day you eat, you will die until you die. And so once Adam and Eve ate, the decision to exercise a decision apart from God then resulted in them dying, and they were going to begin the trek of dying until the very end of their dying. The power of decisions. And so that was part of him laying the groundwork to this. Okay, you are here today because of the decisions that have been made, the fruit of which you are now observing. Those decisions began in the 1960s. And those decisions weren't just a random act of decision making that somehow accumulated to produce what you are experiencing today. It was that, no, these are actually a pattern of decisions that had an architect to them. And it was a spiritual architect that was then put in place, that was given authority over the people of the earth to produce a particular outcome. And so then in the white paper, there's a fairly extensive discussion from a spiritual standpoint about the nature of Satan's government, how it functions and operates, who it is that is given opportunity to rule his kingdom, why, what the prize is in his kingdom, how those spiritual entities operate and work through human beings. And so it began to talk about that in his kingdom there was a transfer of power in his kingdom in the 1960s, where the previous ruler, we might call him in today's world prime minister, the previous prime minister had expended his time to rule, and now there was an insertion of a new prime minister. And this prime minister had a particular way that they operated in order to exercise the rule to produce an outcome. And this all began in the 1960s. And so from there is a connection between the decisions that were made at the spiritual realm and how they were being implemented and affected in the natural realm in order to produce an outcome which we are experiencing today. So it then goes into a number of things like the hippie movement, the drug and concert era. Cadium has some fun with this because he and I lived back there in that era. And when I was writing about it, he called me one day and he said, "Yep, I really related to this. I lived every bit of it." And so where we are I'll kind of pause here for for you to then pick up where you want to take
Yeah.
it from here, is that we are here not by accident, but by design. And there is a very specific way that that design has been implemented. And it has been implemented by hijacking our permission and our authority to do what it cannot do on its own. So if we want to change this, we have to revoke that permission and learn how to make decisions in a different way in order to produce a different outcome. And so that, I don't know what, 5-7 minutes of, kind of overview of that, maybe 10 minutes. So where would you like to go from there, Matt?
Well, I got a couple of things. Are you okay with if somebody emails you to request that writing?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to get your permission because I've got your email address here.
Yeah.
If you're interested in knowing, I think this is a great, you want to take it to the next level with Steve. You can email him here at his email, srstaggs@aol.com. You're like the only guy I know that's got an AOL account still.
Keep it for legacy purposes.
Yeah, it is. It's retro, man. Yeah. So guys, if you're interested in that 1960s white paper, reach out to Steve there. So I'm gonna pick something apart. Okay. I'm gonna not push back. I'm gonna ask you about
push away.
So it's 1963, right? So here's Jesus, right? The author and perfecter, the creator of all things, who's bringing to your attention a question. And this question is, when did Kennedy die? And you made this really good point. I think it illustrates the point incredibly well. I think it's an awesome story. I would make the assumption that, unlike us, Jesus knows how he died, knows everything, right? He knows all of this stuff and potentially coordinated it. Well, you said the moment he died was when he didn't put that cover on.
No, he made the decision.
Decision. Right. Now, one of the things I would say though, and I want to see if I'm catching it the right way. He didn't shoot himself.
No.
Right. And so I think it's important to recognize that decisions were made by others prior to him not covering himself. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So to say that now he did die, you're right. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's interesting that Jesus would say to you that he died when he didn't cover himself, because in some respects, if these things are orchestrated, I want to understand if you didn't shoot yourself, then in a way, he's fulfilling the purpose of dying. Is that how I should see this? Or is it, no, you should have covered yourself up and the bullet would have ricocheted and you'd be alive today or whatever? Is that what you're saying? But that's the weird part, that Jesus would point you to something that is the reflection of your death based on your decision, even though you didn't shoot yourself. Because I could see you saying, hey, I was reckless in driving and I killed myself because of my own decision making. But to say that I died because I didn't cover myself is not in consideration of whomever made the decisions to carry a gun that day and to target the president. But then there's another part of me that thinks that, hold on, maybe actually all of this played out exactly how it was intended to, even though it seems like it's the nature and character of evil, but maybe actually this was the intent of the nature and character of God. I don't know how to make sense of that. How do you?
Yeah, great question, Matt, as all your questions are. This may not sound like a direct answer, but it is. The culture of the world is under the control and rulership of the kingdom of darkness is exclusive by nature. It does not deal well with paradoxes or things that don't appear to be consistent. That's why we talk about contradictions or paradoxes. We can't explain them; they just are.
Yeah,
they're supposed to be. They're supposed to cancel each other out. Yet not only do they not cancel each other out, they actually complement each other. Well, in the kingdom of darkness, it's exclusive by nature, so it can't tolerate that. But the kingdom of God is inclusive by nature, so it can include all kinds of things that appear to be contradictory.
I see.
Those contradictory elements all work together to achieve a particular outcome. Later on in the 60s white paper, there's a section on reaction and proaction. That the nature of reaction is to act second to the first action, and as a result, the one who reacts is controlled by the one who first acts. And that when God created, he was the first to act.
Yeah.
And so every decision, every action is a reaction to that, and every action and reaction will contribute to the first action. All right. So that's the overview of proaction. Inside the exclusive world, and I'm going to put this in a religious context, in exclusive world where religion operates, it's not inclusive by its design. It's exclusive by its design. So thus we have by some counts, 60,000 different Christian denominations. Why? Well, a denomination is a part of a whole. And so this part considers it the truth of the whole. And the whole says, no, you're not, I am. And so you have all of these competing elements. Well, inside that world, they have this thing called predestination. And predestination is the idea that God predestines virtually every single act and outcome. Well, that's not how it works. Because once that occurs, the thing that they don't allow for is the item of choice. So if you don't have choice, if you are predetermined, then you really don't have choice. You exercise some impulse along the way, but you really are not exercising legitimate, non-coercive, choice. So inside from the kingdom of God standpoint, he can point to an outcome without orchestrating those outcomes. They are simply reactions to a first action. Okay, so now let's apply that to the illustration of JFK. JFK made a proactive decision. He was the first to decide. What was that decision? That decision was to drive in Dallas without a protective bulletproof bubble. Okay, that was his decision. Every decision after that is a reaction to related decision to that is a reaction to that decision. Well, what Jesus was illustrating throughout the 60s white paper is that, listen, the importance of decision making. When you make a decision, there is an outcome that decision is going to produce. And that outcome is not just what you intend and decide. That outcome is then the produce of reactive decisions that are related to it that will seek to exploit and control you. So understand the nature of decisions. If somebody is your enemy, when you decide, you give him or her the fodder to then manipulate circumstances in order to take advantage and exploit you. That's the nature of decisions. So when you make decisions on your own, you are making decisions on your own that activate darkness. And when you do, you enter into the domain of darkness where you cannot see all of these elements that are around you that are working to exploit you. So don't do that.
There you go. Just don't do that.
There's another way to make decisions.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, why do you think I said, Jesus now speaking, that I don't do anything on my own?
Hmm.
I don't make any decisions on my own. I make decisions with my Father. Why? Because he sees everything. I want to enter into his proactive decision train, right? That's where I want to operate. See, so that whatever is then reacting to his decision is actually contributing to the outcome he prescribes. Now, the nature of sovereignty, and you and I have talked about that in the green room and off stream here, about sometime talking about the very nature of sovereignty, because there's a lot of discussion about sovereignty inside the crypto world.
Yeah.
Freedom and sovereignty. Well, what is freedom? What is sovereignty? What are the implications of that? What are the responsibilities that come with that? What opportunities not only occur for you, but what are the opportunities opens up to in opposition to you? All of these various things. So without getting too verbose in this, that no, when Kennedy made his proactive decision, Jesus is not going to intrude on that. See, that by him being born, somehow in the dynamics of decision making, Kennedy, it will have fulfilled his personal destiny for being created, that somehow works together. How, I have no clue. Somehow works together to be able to work inclusively, to not interrupt his sovereign ability to choose, while at the same time accomplishing the divine purpose for which he was created. That does not lay at the feet of Jesus the responsibility for him being murdered. It is part of the free expression of life. See, that exists, that Jesus will not intrude on. Now, man, once you see that picture and how it works, you see it everywhere. Kind of like we were talking about before. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yep.
That's exactly how it works. And Jesus is not up there saying yay or nay on every decision that's going on up there. He is focused solely on the decisions that the Father is making, and then all the reactive things that happen out there are part of the self-cleansing element of how the creation was designed to function. That's why he said heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will not pass away.
Yeah.
There is a self-cleansing element that exists in the creative design, that all those reactive decisions will actually result in their dissipation to where they're no longer a problem on related to the divine will.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah. Wow.
Did any of that make sense? I know that was a long answer.
No, that it did, and it actually is prompting me to. It's like sitting at the feet of the professor, right? And it's like I take things away from these, right? There's these nuggets of things that I take away, and I'm struck by kind of the review of everything, right? It's like how all of these things fold back into themselves. This whole thing that we're doing, 27 episodes, Steve, right side up. Well, why is it called right side up? Because the world is upside down. Okay, well, what is that? That's a way in which in the English language you can understand that things are not oriented correctly. Okay. What's interesting is when we first started all this and we had these conversations, we start with the basics. And I think what's really fascinating is my first, derivative product of Steve Staggs was, hey, Jesus is alive and he speaks. Okay, that's a pretty good basis. Let's start there. And why did that strike me so much is because, well, a lot of people are kind of treating him like he's dead.
Yeah.
And what's funny is Steve, talk about being able to see something. Every time I go to church, every Sunday, I'm like, all I hear is dead Jesus, constantly dead Jesus. Oh man, he was all past tense stuff. I mean, throughout it all. Okay. But if I were to challenge anyone in that room and I asked them, is Jesus alive? They'd probably say yes. But the language is not of that. Okay. Well, does he speak? And I think where we to review of all of this stuff, which really relates to what you just had said, is why would God decide to come here? Right? Why would Jesus come here? And then what did he say when he was here? And I think what's amazing is it's funny. Leadership, one of the things I learned as a CEO of a company was that I found myself repeating myself a lot. And that was really important.
Yes.
That not everyone hears it the same way, and not everyone has heard the story.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really valuable is I would always at least do one interview of every new employee. And every time, and I would do interviews, and I would know in seconds if this person was going to be on the team or not.
Yeah.
Because what I would do is I would tell my story, and they either resonated with them or it didn't. And I could know in very short order if this was somebody that would fit in. But I think the big point of all of this is we have the modeling of behavior of when we see Jesus in his time on earth that we have at least an account of in the scriptures. And I think it's interesting that there's not a study or a book or something that is really, really popular in the Christian world that is about the speaking Jesus. Because the more and more I dig in and the more I talk with you, the more and more I see it, right? Literally, the verse of the day yesterday was this talk of the counselor. It was the talk of how there would be this spirit that would come and that he would be sent in my name, it says.
Yeah.
Sent in my name. That's Jesus. In my name, in Jesus's name, he would come and remind you of everything I said.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, I've met people in my life who think, the Holy Spirit is like, in a rock band. And it's really interesting. No, what did Jesus say? He said, no, I'm going to send you one. Really, a mechanism of the greatest decentralization that ever happened in the world is that I would send one who would remind you of everything I said, but he's coming in my name, under my authority. Okay. And then we go to things like out of the wilderness. He's like, no, man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Or I only do what I see my Father doing. The Father and I are one. This is my Son. Listen to him. There's so much. It is so rich, and it repeated over and over and over and over again of what I said to you. And then, of course, you've got, things that buttress that, like, hey, faith comes through hearing. And we even talked about lopping the guard's ear off. Don't take his ear off. He needs to be able to hear. And what I think is really amazing about this stream that we've had here that kind of wrapped this stuff up with a bow in a way is that the decision-making process has a lot of implications to it. And that this part of our own choices that we make and the decisions we make have outcomes. And if we go on our own and make decisions on our own without consideration of him, we kind of get what we get, right? And it even says, the consequences of sin is death. This is an interesting idea that what is that separation? What is that? Like, I'm going it alone. And of course, every time I've ever gone it alone, where did I end up? Eating slop of pigs, and it's like, well, hold on. If the nature and character of the one who created it all is this idea that it starts with me and my own nature and character, and I go, hold on, and there's no problem that you've come across that he doesn't have a perspective and opinion on, that we could go to the one who speaks and is alive and ask, how do you see this? And that, I think in Christendom, we've inserted, well, I'll just pray about that, Steve. Just going to do a little praying about that, and I'll get back to you. No, Jesus is alive, and he speaks, and he sees it a certain way. Why don't you ask him? And I think that is so cool because all of this stuff is neatly wrapped even though we go off on all of these tangents, right? And that we talk about it, it all comes back to the same thing, the simplicity of Jesus is alive and he speaks, and he wants to partner. This is the whole idea of how this all fits together. He partnered with us, and there's nothing that he can't handle, and there's no problem that he can't give us. But I think there's a joy, and that's what I kind of experienced this morning is like this, kind of shooting the breeze with Jesus. Like, okay, well, what is it that we're doing here? Well, I really like it when you ask me how I see things. And it's interesting that I just reminded of scripture, like, well, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he'll make your path straight. Well, I'd like a straight path, Steve. Okay, well, ask him how he sees it. And you think about it, how straight the path becomes, but also it's not that it seems like these things that he speaks are it makes it so clear that it's upside down.
Well, that's what happens to you. Or at least that's what happened to me is that I don't have a grid for really hearing and understanding what he's saying and showing. And so most of the time I misinterpret it, or I insert my training into what he is saying and showing, which is upside down.
Yeah.
And so the experience that he takes me through is what begins to shed and scrape off all of that upside down thinking. And he does it in stages, because if he were to do it all at once, I couldn't handle it. Right. And so he does it in stages. So the question, you're mentioning about the 60s white paper. The 60s white paper is giving you both high level, hey, here's how it is, simply stated, and then dives deeply into a lot of the technical mechanics of it, so that you can have the high level picture or the deep dive picture. But it all comes back to the same basic fundamental. If you like what you've got, keep making the decisions the way that you are. If you don't like what you've got, then think about changing the way you make your decisions. It applies both to you as an individual. It applies to the planet as a whole. You can look at either one and make your decision from there. So choose. The authority has been given to you to choose.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? So I think you've hit a bullseye on that, Matt. It just does not, it has 1,000 billion implications and flavors to it, but it all boils down to the one very simple binary choice. Do I want to make decisions on my own? But I'd like to learn how to make decisions with you, Jesus. That's a binary choice.
You know what's funny?
And you can do either one.
It's so awesome, Steve. You know what actually it's you know how we talk about in the church. I jokingly said that it's Christian entertainment at times. It's just like, well, yeah, that's what we do. And that there's like this past Jesus. Oh my goodness, what amazing. That dead Jesus, he's awesome. And then the Jesus of the future, that returning Jesus, he's powerful, dude. But it's almost like a chapter has been missing from this book. It's like, well, what should I do day to day? Well, just love God and love other people. And I'm like, well, that's not really much of a formula to this. Like, what's the meat and potatoes of this? What's interesting, Steve? This is the meat and potatoes of it. This is the how it works. And it's it's what I've longed for a long time. It's like, how do I do this? How does this work? And how do I do this? And if I could distill it down, David Lee said it the other day. He's like, Steve's giving us the cheat code, man. And of course, that's a gaming analogy for like, hey, you've got all the guns and all the powers and all the stuff. And it's like, hey, you cut us in on the deal. But there's also, it's what I've wanted for a long time.
Yeah.
And that is the practical how to. How do I do this? Like, how do I do this? And how do I do this in the right context? And how, in the simplicity of it, what I'm taking from all this stuff is, if decisions are so important and Jesus isn't alive and he speaks, and he desires to partner with you, and that you can do nothing without him, why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask him? And see what the implications are of listening to the one who knows it all, created it all, and has it orchestrated. Because you're right. Now I really understand what you're saying. In a month, this could be different. Why? Because it's ultimately about the nature and character. But you assume his nature and character when you ask him
Yes.
and you follow that direction and that guidance. And it's really interesting. It's like I've given you the ability to make choices on your own, and I'm here. And I think that that's the thing we're calling people to, which I think is so beautiful, is when we say Jesus is alive and he speaks, it's so big and so powerful, because it's not Steve is alive and he speaks, Matt's alive and he speaks. No, no. In fact, it goes against all of those people trying to monetize Christianity. You're not asking people to donate to your nonprofit or come to your church or do this. You're like, no, there's a guy who made it all. Jesus is alive and he speaks. Ask him yourself and realize that if you included him, or he includes you, but however you want to communicate it, considering my decision-making process in the context of a living Jesus is transformational.
Yes.
But I think what's happened is we've been lied to, that he's dead, he's not alive, he doesn't speak, and he has nothing to say on this topic. And in fact, the complete opposite is the truth. He has plenty to talk about and desires and would love to engage with you in that.
That's right on. And you said it right on. I mean, just the mere fact that you're interested begins the journey of a change of nature and character. That's where it starts. Jesus, I'm interested in what you have to say. Will you teach me how to hear your voice and to partner with you? I'm in.
Yep.
That's the beginning of the change of the nature and character, because every time he speaks something to us or makes us aware of something or whatever he does begins that process of forming and shaping his nature and character in us. And before you know it, it doesn't take long. And you're starting to think differently. You're starting to decide differently. And guess what happens? You start living differently because your decisions are starting to mount and grow that are rooted in him. And all of a sudden you look around and you go, whoa, there's a lot of garbage going on there. Jesus, what's happening? Because I'm not nearly as worked up as all of my other friends. Why not?
Yeah. No, there you go. Though
I worked up.
There's some evidence right
Am
there.
I worked up, Steve? Well, no. As a matter of fact, I've been on the edge of a cliff looking back down over that thing, and you're just cool as a cucumber.
Yeah.
And as if it's no big deal. Well, just because you're on the edge of the cliff, does that mean you've fallen off the cliff? No, you can be as secure on the edge of the cliff as you are in the middle of the planet.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of perspective. It's like, how do you think like this?
Yeah.
Where do you come up with this stuff? And it is very transformational. What does CryptoPress say?
So CryptoPest says, these videos have definitely helped me hear the voice of Jesus. I'm finding small things in my life are changing because of that. I'm cleaning up these small things without any effort.
Good for you. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Just follow him and you'll find that that's what happens. Yeah.
I love this. I wake up and ask Jesus what I shall do today. Sometimes I get no answer. I take that as a day off. Jesus is merciful. Nothing like a little comedy right there. That's fantastic. Folks, thanks for joining us today. Episode 27. Another 2 hours of your life have gone by. Steve, thanks again, man. This is some really good stuff. And what I love about it is it's like we go into the expansion of it and we examine all these edges, and then it comes right back to the very heart of this very simple idea, the nature and character.
Yeah.
And it's powerful stuff. So thanks, Steve. We'll catch you next week. Have a great weekend, man.
You do the same.
Yep.
See you, everybody.
See ya. All right, folks. Once again, 2 hours, episode 27 with Steve Staggs. That was amazing. It's so neat. Think about this. I don't know about you, but I haven't done anything in my life as consistent as this channel. I have not. I mean, I really look at it. I've been involved in a lot of different things, but this is probably the most consistent I've been for over 2 years, week in, week out, doing something. And then, of course, this is the last 27 episodes of this is just a highlight of that because it's very rare. I do a lot of interviews, talk about crypto topics, or we do a pump stream, or we talk about this, that, or the other. This is probably the most concentrated of, at least in public, kind of engaging with these challenges that I think are very, very practical, but have these profound, fundamental answers that I've been looking for a long time. And to think that I met Steve at a Texan meetup. Literally, if you guys don't know this, I shook his hand and the Lord said, "Listen to this guy." And I'm like, "Is he an angel?" Well, he kind of is in the modern vernacular. Folks, thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and have a great weekend. And don't mess with Texas. We'll catch you very, very soon. We'll see you on Sunday, actually, for the Texan Tailgate. I'm going to be co hosting. We're going to do a pump stream for Texicon. Hope to see you there. Take care, everybody.